So, what do I? Oh, there we go. And
I'm
what do I call you?
Jafar.
Jafar. Okay, I wasn't sure. I knew that was your name on YouTube chat, but I didn't know if that's what you went by on purpose or in person. So, all right, cool.
Um, so I'm here with J.S.Garret. He's of the Become a Living God crew, and I'll be asking his spiritual opinions and experiences. And if he'll indulge me with, I I have these 9 vibration names in Daemoniacus Vmmh, which now I guess I should call it fully in its language as Lzwvmmh. So if that's okay for me to open up with your name in that language.
Yeah, absolutely.
enwl Yzot fahalu yamiga enwl yamiga enwl Yzot and 2 words might be recognized by some people here. We got enwl, which is a sign or a symbol or a call, and yamiga, which is it's basically the way to one's own power. So your Shamyaza's symbol, that's seemed a fitting element for it, and the thing also includes what date it is today. So
Oh,
using
cool.
lunar calendar and such. What do you think the purpose of life is?
Oh shit. That's the ultimate question, right? I mean, nobody really knows. We all have different ideas. I've heard probably 20 different theories that make sense to me. I think it depends on what level of reality we're talking about. I think on some level, that we're probably here to advance to the next stage of spiritual evolution. I think on some level, we're probably just cattle in a field for some species that probably likes to eat us. And I think on the grand cosmic scale, if you think about the size of the entire universe and how small we are, it makes you feel really insignificant. But then at the same time, um, you can also see how in our individual realities and consciousness we're very important as we are the microcosm versus the macrocosm. So as far as the purpose of life, man, I have no idea. I'm trying to figure that out just like the rest of us. I definitely think that this should be a gift. Life should be abundant, and we should enjoy this experience and grow from it. But as far as what the ultimate purpose is, I really couldn't tell you.
You said next stage is spiritual evolution. So do you mean reincarnation or
Well,
transfer to a fitting stage in maybe something that doesn't bounce us back?
all right. Well, if reincarnation, there's definitely a lot of good evidence for that. So I'm inclined to believe that that happens. Okay, so if you think about it, they're proving scientifically that this is a simulation, essentially, like the holographic universe theory. If anyone's read that book, it will definitely make sense to you. So what if we are much higher beings already than we think that we are? What if this is like a total recall matrix type of simulation where we're essentially in school for something. What if we're already gods that are incarnating here in this physical form that is temporary in order to become more powerful, more advanced, and evolved godlike beings? That's a really cool theory that I can kind of get on board with. So if you think about it like that, then yeah, I mean, you could have 100 lifetimes, and we could all be different types of creatures, different types of souls from different parts of the solar system that are all playing this video game. That's kind of the best evidence for that, I think, or some of the best evidence is the fact that magic works. I look at magic spells like cheat codes for the video game that we're all playing. It's a very strange world that we live in, and anything and everything seems to be possible here. So, I mean, if it's all a hologram, then anything that you download into that program would be made manifest physically. So, yeah, it's a really good question, though.
Well, one of the underlying themes in pretty much every religion except Christianity is that okay, there's a basic that we're all here for that's is enough, but those who want more, they can definitely try for the highest heaven or however it's said. It's like ISKCON, for example, focuses on the teachings that, oh yeah, we can all being part of the lower class, no matter no matter what wealth or power or whatever you're born into, everybody's lower class, but they're meant to go higher. But figuring out how to go higher is not it's not in everybody's hands.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about it from a standpoint of that we're all reincarnating multiple times here in order to advance to a certain degree or accomplish a certain level of advancement, then who's to say you couldn't go beyond the standard of this lifetime? Why couldn't you advance 2 or 3 lifetimes in this single incarnation? And that's essentially what these people who are doing the gatekeeper path working are doing. It's almost like they are reincarnating over and over into this same body and advancing to levels that are beyond what was expected for this lifetime. So that's a conversation we could sit here and speculate about all day long. I wish I had a definite answer for these questions, but I mean,
Well,
even if I
definitely
do
done a
it,
lot. I've definitely done a lot of research into a cult that they thought that through dreams and visions, a person could make up for however many past lives you have, and that's that's why the explanation that most people who join the organization, things get worse in some aspects. It's not that life gets easier; it's that it gets worse. But people feel like, okay, I'm dealing with stuff that I wouldn't have dealt with.
yeah, yeah, it's not easy.
Of course, the one guy, nobody said this to him. Other people they may have said this to, but that um, had they told him that that his daughter was raped because of something she did in a past life or something, it would have been worse than him just leaving the group. But they withheld for him. But some people they don't they don't withhold, but that's not really the way to go about it. If you think,
Yeah. All right. So whenever you get into all that stuff, especially with cults, secret orders, things like that, and primarily right hand path gurus will try to convince you that the things that are happening to you now are a result of past life incidents, lessons you didn't learn, or things that you're being punished for. I take all of that stuff with a grain of salt. That's why it's really important not to have a guru or have a master for any length of time. I might go, if I wanted to learn how to do Reiki or something, I might go to a Reiki guru to learn the basics. But don't become a disciple, and definitely don't take everything that they say as 100% fact, because if you actually pay attention to these people in their everyday lives, that's just another dude that's trying to make it through the day. And we're all struggling. You know, I mean, once you reach that ultimate level of advancement that you can reach in this lifetime, I don't think you come back. You know, I mean, what if the ultimate goal of path working and spiritual advancement is to not have to reincarnate again? You know, maybe you move on to some other higher level of existence, you know, in another dimension. But if they're here walking around in these human bodies, then they are not a master. Because if you reach that level, then you would probably literally float off the planet into fourth level density. So that's the way. That's kind of the way I look at it. You got to put everything into perspective. Nobody has all the answers, and
That in a way, if they do, almost all of them say they're all say the person's always right, but it's inflected in his personal psychology. There's going to be some differences between the person and the physical situation that the other people are in, and he may have it down perfect for him, but
yeah,
you know,
yeah, absolutely,
and so what happens to some people? It's like this one guy. He wrote great books and all this stuff, and then he became the leader. He was already sort of a leader in the movement, but he became a leader of thousands of Sufis. And all of a sudden, it wasn't, are you doing the work? Are you having getting rid of the bad beliefs in your life and all that stuff? It was you must accept the shake of the time, or you're ignorant, even with doing all the right things and believing all the right things. Except you must know the shake of the time. And by the way, it's me. So he started giving lectures that could be summed up like that, and it's like, okay, yeah, I'm done with listening to this. But he wrote good books before that, though.
yeah, you know, there's definitely entities or forces, whatever you want to call it, an energetic force with a conscious intelligence behind it that influences people that get into positions of power in order to corrupt them. I believe that 100%. And that's why the people that rule this planet are the most evil and wicked out of all of us, typically. So it's important to keep yourself in check, and it's important to check the people that you're listening to and that are influencing you. I don't tell anybody, I'll tell them, don't listen to me, find out for yourself. Get the tools that you need to make contact with these beings yourself, and then go your own direction. It's once you start getting in the guru mentality and starting cults and secret orders, I mean, it might start out wonderful as something good and perfect, and but it only takes one generation for that all to go to shit. And that's what we see time and time again with every religion, every organization out there. They
Look,
start out good and then they become bad over time.
look at what happened when as soon as Muhammad ibn Abdullah died. It wasn't too long that some of his followers were, killing each other over political positions and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Christianity is a prime example. I mean, I guarantee you, like, there's a reason why they say that Christ is going to destroy the world when and if he ever comes back. And I could totally see that if that really happened. Imagine coming back and seeing that they've taken all of your teachings and built a corrupt religion around it to murder and enslave people on a global scale. You'd be pretty pissed off too. I mean, but if you
It's
go
it's
back,
it's interesting how looking at some of the original languages, how much is uncovered. There's a huge difference between Kyriakos and Kyrioko or something like that, and ecclesia. Church is not what the Jesus figure in the Bible is presenting. And you also find out that there's at least four people before that, and they basically graft those four people into stories about Bacchus and some other stuff. And even Paul's movement didn't last a century. By the time the Didache was written, and then the Catholic Church was founded in 180. They literally didn't they? Was it like 5 years ago or something? They actually found manuscripts of them actually composing the origins of the Catholic Church, and you still end up with over 1 billion people that it didn't phase them at all.
yeah, I believe you're correct there, and we're uncovering new things all the time. And I mean, it wasn't that long ago that they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's a book that was totally removed from the Bible, the Book of Enoch. So I mean, it's really easy to take a philosophy and corrupt it and twist it after the people who founded that are dead and gone. I mean, look at the America. You know, the people that founded this country had a totally different way of thinking than the people who run it now. So yeah, nothing stays preserved over time. And it's just how it is. I wish it wasn't like that. I mean I could I could
Well,
easily
yeah,
try.
there's a difference between something in a book and something in the human heart,
Yeah,
and you know,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and
people like the guru thing is one side of the fanatic thing. Another side of the fanatic thing is when you have people, they just do enough to have the label. So instead of having the temple or the teacher or something be it, and then they worship, they act like, oh, I can't pray, I can't do a ritual if I'm not in a particular temple, or I can't, I have to worship through this guy, whether he said to or not, and all this other stuff. The other thing is basically people that are just doing enough to be called whatever faith group they want to be called,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's one of the big things now is that it's like, um, you go to one of those places with damaged or used goods or something, and you're in the middle of making your decisions, and the guy just surprises you with a "Jesus loves you," but right before you're going to buy, and you're taking your last look over everything, you know,
yeah.
almost like trying to distract you from making a, you know,
Yeah, well, I mean, religion's always been a tool of control, and government has always been a tool of control. And so, whenever government gets a hold of religion, there's no real separation between church and state. That's why every religion, every major religion of every major company, like or country, the rules, regulations, and philosophies of that religion directly reflect the laws of that government body. So essentially, I think they're tricking people into worshiping the government, which feeds power into that regime, along with all the money that we constantly pump into it as well. So I
the,
mean,
the idea that everybody acts according to their beliefs or lack of. So it's utterly ridiculous to think that there's this. Okay, not I'm well aware of the Establishment Clause, but the idea that people aren't still up there acting according to their beliefs it just doesn't work. It's like the Bible doesn't have consent for marriage is not required for a male or a female. There's honor killings, all sorts of stuff in the Bible, and the idea that you know I was raised in a church founded in the 1800s, and that church. It was a time where forced marriage was the thing, and if they didn't think if they wanted to make sure that everybody was paired up, and there was forced marriages all over pretty much everywhere they went, because they wanted to make sure that everybody was paired up, whether you wanted to be or not.
yeah,
So there was a spare woman, nope, you had to marry her, or vice versa.
yeah. So what's the difference between that and rape? It's an evil practice, in my opinion. And you look at if you go back if you look
And
at the things that
there, I went to Utah in the 90s, and there were places where you couldn't walk backwards, and there's these little weird blue laws and stuff. They're doing away with as much as possible, but there's stuff trying to enforce certain things. It's like, okay, the Bible doesn't say Sunday, but you know there's plenty places on the East Coast where Sunday, all of a sudden on Sunday, you can't buy or sell certain things.
what's the point in that? You know,
What?
what's the point in all of that? I wonder.
Well, they obviously still want some of that control, but they're claiming there's no. But it's like the drug laws. The drug law is like either have all the intoxicants lawful or don't. They just want a prison class.
Yeah, yeah. Don't even get me started on that. We
It's
have lots of prisons, and they have to stay full, otherwise they don't make any money. So I mean, everybody in society is except for the elite. We're all slaves to the system. And you either work hard and pay your taxes, or we'll put you in jail and make money off of you that way. It's very easy to see the grand design when you sit back and really pay attention to it and don't get caught up in the drama of any one specific area of problems. Everybody has their own little cause: the animal rights, the racial activists, the feminists, the Democrat, Republican, liberal. We've all got our own little causes that we get really obsessed about. But if you sit back and look at it all as a whole, you realize that it's the core problem is at the core of the system. And the only way you're ever going to change that is to revamp the system somehow. Anyway, that's a really touchy subject.
Is there anything particular that you believe that's happened to you before your birth in a mystical sense?
That's happened to me before my birth? I really don't know. Are you talking about like past lives or something that happened?
Past life, call pre-existence, sort of preparation for life, whatever sort of category you may have any opinion or sense of experience regarding.
Well, I've had some very interesting lucid dreams, as well as really intense scenario type dreams that weren't lucid, that just played out the same way over and over, like reoccurring dreams since childhood, and they seem to be based off a particular point or event in history. So I've wondered if those reoccurring dreams were past lifetimes that I may or may not have lived. But as far as a definite answer, I don't know, dude. I have no idea. I'd love to know, but yeah, I have no way to prove it, even if I did know.
Well, there's certainly the knowledge that a person can know it, but other people won't know it.
Yeah.
It's like I saw something through a microscope back in middle school, and apparently it wasn't in the textbook, and a decade later they released a textbook and said, that's what I saw. I knew I saw it. But
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I mean, like the first question you asked me, what's the point to this life? Even if I 100% knew the right answer to that question and sat here and broke it all down for you in the audience and told you, there'd be no way for me to prove it. It'd just be a theory, even if it was correct. So, I mean, that's really all these are theories.
Do you have a conception of an afterlife or a next life for yourself?
Well, I guess that would all depend on everyone's personal belief system. If you buy into the Christian paradigm where you're either going to heaven or hell, then chances are you're going to create your own heaven or hell based on whether or not you feel like you deserve to be in one of them. And since we're all sinners in that mindset, and we're all inherently evil, and every single one of those people sitting in church has done things that they don't ever want to see the light of day. So what if simply through that fear and belief that they may go to hell, they create their own hell, and that's exactly where they go? That could be a possibility. If you think you're going to reincarnate, then maybe that's what you do. Me personally, I want to break out of this reality altogether. I don't want to have to come back here and do this again, and I don't want to go sit in some other god's idea of heaven. If I had to choose, I would want to create my own reality where my consciousness would go and dwell after I died. That is totally of my own choosing and creation. Now, as far as what's going to happen, I have no idea. I've talked to people who have died for a period of time and then been revived, and they all have different stories. Some talk about heaven, some say they went to hell, others say it was just blackness. They didn't have any experience whatsoever during the 5 or 10 minutes that they were deceased. So I mean, it could very well just depend on our belief system. What if everything that people believe is existing now on the astral plane due to their belief in it? It could be anything.
Well, certainly that's actually the idea of a crystallization of one's beliefs okay, you're not allowed to keep the delusions, but honestly, if you're like, the sinner thing, if you're, there's a huge difference to approaching uh, God or whatever as and saying, hey, I've, I've been trying to believe and do the right things, and coming to the judgment and saying, I'm an unworthy sinner. And it's like, what is that God supposed to say? Oh, no, no, you're, don't worry, you're worthy. There's probably going to say, you're right. If anything, that seems more likely to me. That's sort of an agreement with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, if this is a holographic reality, then anything and everything is possible. And if we, the microcosm, are creating this reality through our observation of it, then anything that we can dream into existence can exist. And that's probably in life as well as death. So your guess is as good as mine.
well, that's why you see people in a lot of pain happier than the people that seem to have ease and luxury. Is that they're focusing on something of value rather than where they're losing, or
Yeah.
where they don't have something, because there's no matter what position you are, there's always something you could want that you don't have. You're always going to know that there's some sort of limit. Not saying that you don't try for more of this
Yeah.
world like that.
Well, nobody's got it easy in this physical life. I mean, they might have it easy compared to this guy over here, but it doesn't matter how much you know, how good of a magician you are, how much money you have. You're always dealing with something. We all have struggles, and we all have problems and ailments and things that we are struggling with. And everybody's problems are just as big to them as the guy next to them. So you might not, from a third party observation, if I'm comparing two people and be like, hey, you got it really easy compared to this dude next to you with no arms and legs. But if they don't look at that guy and compare themselves to the guy with no arms and legs, then they don't ever think that way. Their problem is just as big as his as far as they're concerned. So nobody has it all figured out. And it doesn't matter how much money you make or how good of a magician you become, you're always going to have obstacles to overcome. So I mean, it does seem like we are always trying to learn and grow from something here.
Well, it doesn't quite make the point as well with the yin yang flag as the other flags in the other room, but the uh, the black flag symbolism of doing the right thing or being upon the right or whatever, even through difficulty and causing change and that sort of thing. It's definitely the side of that symbolism that I seem to identify most with as far as black symbolism.
Very cool.
So when you do the what you consider to be the right thing, is it more likely to be out of love of doing good, or pleasing a deity, personal enjoyment or pleasure, the hope of the results of your deeds, the fear of the consequences of not doing the right, hate for doing wrong, or even those who would do differently?
Hmm. I think for most people it'd be a combination of all of those. That would influence their decision making. Me personally, if I'm doing something that I think is good or righteous, then I'm doing it really just for the sake of that's what needs to be done, in my opinion, and I don't have any other choice according to who I am as to what decision I make here. Same thing if I'm going to do something bad, to do something evil. We all have our reasons that we justify those things for. You can do it to please a deity. You can do it to please your peers. You can do it so you can pat yourself on the back and feel like a good person that day. Yeah, I think it all depends on the situation and the decision at hand as to the factor that goes into what causes us to make that choice. It's always going to be different.
Is there anything that you think would be hard to do as a spiritual practice?
Anything like a ritual type practice that I think would be hard
Uh,
to do?
well, yes and no. More broad than that, like an aspect of life, a certain type of action. Um,
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'll say that the one of the hardest things to do when you're embarking on a path working, a spiritual path working, regardless of what that path working is, if it's actually worth doing, then at some point you're going to have to take responsibility for yourself. You're going to have to face yourself without any lies or misconceptions of who and what you are. And that can be the hardest thing to do is to really face yourself from an outside perspective. And the other hardest thing that I've really had to do is face fear beyond terror. It was in my first path working with Belial or Belial, and during that I experienced something that is very similar to what I've heard described as the shaman's death. That's where you experience a slow death. You'll feel your organs being cut out of your body, and you're reduced down to a skeleton, and you're experiencing fear and anxiety beyond what you ever thought you could endure and survive. And essentially, the spirits take you apart and destroy everything that you are, and then put you back together, and you are different after that. That's the hardest thing I've ever been through. That's the hardest thing that anyone I know of has ever been through. The few people that have experienced that, and if you either make it through that or you don't, you either end up in a mental institution or dead, or you come out of that on the other side and you are something more than what you were to start with. But before you can do that, you must be destroyed, and that is the hardest thing that I've ever endured.
I'm reminded of my 18th Nokian Vision. Well, I mean, I've practiced things more than once, but the one that really stood out, that I had characters that I wrote down later. I didn't know what they were. I just wrote them down, and I'm like, wait a second. Okay, they're okay. The 49 names. Okay, but I didn't know this at the time. I was just, these beings recited this list of 343 characters, and each time, skin, flesh, bone, and then I was left as a as a soul, alternating kind of starry sort of shapes, but not what I drew with a couple stars, But I mean, that's an honest way of representing it, I would say. But it didn't come with pain for me. It was overwhelming, but it wasn't anything I was afraid of. But I guess when you've already had the crushing in and tearing apart and stuff experiences before, when something else comes in, it's not. So, but if it's the first thing, yeah, that would be kind of.
Yeah, it's not easy. A lot of people get into the occult practices because they're wanting to make their life easier or better. And they either want money, they want love, or they want revenge, or they want all three. Typically, that's what draws people into the practice of magic. And you can get all those things, no problem. But if you want to do a path working and evolve spiritually, then that's not going to be easy. There's going to be highs and lows. The highs are like pure bliss. It's like being on spiritual heroin. The lows are just as intense, but the opposite of that. The lows are really low. When you get into, what EA calls dark night of the soul, that's really difficult to go through. And that's something that you'll go through multiple times if you do multiple path workings throughout your life. And I think a lot of people get to a point where, they experience something like that, and it's so taxing on them, and it's so difficult that they're done after that. They're like, okay, I made it through. I'm happy where I'm at. I'm just going to stick to the system that I've gone comfortable with, and they don't aspire to go any further because they know if they bite off another chunk, then they are stuck on that roller coaster through hell and to the other side. So I think it takes a very unique type of person to keep coming back for more and more punishment over and over. And it's those people are the ones that have that insatiable drive to figure out all these questions like you're asking me now. You know, the answers to the secrets of the universe, the keys to power, and you know, I think that's different for each person. But for those who really dedicate their entire life simply to the practice of a magical art form, that's the only thing that'll ever do it for them again. It's like a drug, you know. It's about finding your drug of choice and really indulging in that, for better or for worse.
Well, like I've seen how, yeah, like when it comes to, okay, maybe to have an experience once a month, but to have that experience once a month, it can seem like they're, you know, that's why affirmations that are basically without value, people tend to give them up, because if there's not the devotion and development associated with it, they're just, you know, trying to make themselves feel good with an affirmation. And it actually turns they've done studies that compared the difference between these things being spiritual and not spiritual, and shown that people tend to have to do more when they don't have that connection with it. Or maybe they do the same and it kind of doesn't have quite the effect as usually. But
yeah, you know, I look at affirmations as it's almost like communion with your higher self. You know, like an affirmation that will speak often is, "I am healthy, I'm wealthy, I'm happy." You know, it's like you are speaking that into existence, even if it's not true, even if you're not healthy, wealthy, and happy. If you can say that enough times to where you start to feel that way, when your thoughts marry your emotions, that is when you create change in this reality. So it doesn't just come down to the words you say, it comes down to how you feel ultimately. So you can say those affirmations, but if you don't feel the way that you are trying to manifest, then it will never happen. So the key is to get to where you can feel those things. Feel healthy, feel wealthy, feel happy, even if it's just in the moment while you're saying it. And what you're doing is you are programming your higher self, that all-seeing eye that is a holographic projector that is projecting the hologram that is you, okay? That's your higher self. And you are feeding instructions to that projector to manifest you in that light, in this reality. That's the way I look at it.
it's a sort of a Confucian way of looking at it.
Well, maybe.
Well, I mean, they say that that Li or ritual is the vehicle for Ren. So you establish or you maintain character through ritual.
Well, you know, they say that whatever you do in ritual manifests or plays itself out in reality over time. So yeah, I mean, if you're getting into a character, like you're doing a rite to try to make yourself healthy, wealthy, and happy, then yeah, I guess if you were going to do a ritual for that, then you'd want to start out with those affirmations that trigger those emotions, and you want to get into that character. And the ultimate goal is to make that who you actually are. So I mean, yeah, that makes sense.
What are your favorite attributes of divinity?
Favorite attributes of divinity. Well, yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer to that. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I haven't reached a level of divinity yet to where I can come to that conclusion.
Is there any limits you would ascribe to a god?
Well, it depends on what that God is. If that God is an egregore that was created by a group of people who built a religion around it, then its limitations would reflect whatever it has been programmed to be. If it's a God that existed long before mankind and therefore is not created by mankind, then you know, if it is truly a God, then I wouldn't think there would be any limitations to it other than the ones that it puts on itself by personal choice.
How much time do you think could be spent in spiritual practice on a daily basis?
ideally, your entire day should have spiritual practice incorporated into it. I will say that life gets in the way. You know, I might want to meditate for 10 hours a day, but that's never going to be possible if you have a job and a family and responsibilities. I mean, if you can find a way to make your mundane, everyday responsibilities magical practices at the same time, then that would be ideal. You know, this is a way of life. You don't just say, okay, I'm going to be a magician for 30 minutes a day, and then after that, I'm just, going to continue being a regular person. Um, so I think that, if you're driving down the road, why can't you do affirmations? Why can't you practice evocation while you're driving? You go into a meditative state when you drive, so it should be relatively easy for you to commune with the gods while you're driving as well, because you're already in that theta state. So, yeah, I think that you should make your entire existence a spiritual practice.
Is there anything you would consider in terms of a weekly, monthly, yearly, or other occasional sort of spiritual practice that's
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good question. All right, so this is something that I don't think I've talked about in the video yet or written about. So a lot of people will only make offerings to spirit guides, companions, gods, demons, whatever it is that they work with, when they need something, you know? And I think that that's a mistake. There are times, and it's usually, either once a month or once every 3 months, where I will lay out a ritual circle and I will simply call upon all of my familiars, spirit guides, spiritual companions, every entity that I've ever formed a relationship with or has ever helped me in any way. I will call them all into the same circle and offer them a blood sacrifice, a sacrifice of burning flesh and blood, simply to show my love and gratitude and appreciation for everything that they have done for me. And I ask nothing in return. The only thing that I desire in return is to maintain that relationship and make them stronger. And I think that if people would do that on a regular basis, then they would get more out of that than they would any other type of ritual that they do. Because a little bit of gratitude and respect goes a long way. And if I'm a king demon or a god, and the only time this little peon comes to me is when he wants something, then I'm going to have a little bit less respect for him than I am for the guy that honors me just for the sake of the relationship and to show gratitude and appreciation. So, I mean, if you try to see yourself through the eyes of the gods, how do they look at you? How would you look at you if you were that god looking down at this pathetic little creature in a meat suit that wants to be like you? Do you act in a divine way? Do you hold yourself accountable for your own reality? And do you show appreciation to the gods that you work with when you only need something, or do you show appreciation because you actually genuinely appreciate it? And so and it doesn't have to be a sacrifice of burning flesh and blood. If you're not capable of doing that, if you can't hire someone to do that for you, offer what you can. Do something, buy a steak from the grocery store and put that on a fire, if all you can do is light some candles and incense and sit there and say thank you in the magic circle, then do that. But call forth every entity that you form a relationship with and show your love and appreciation in whatever capacity, the maximum capacity that you are capable of at that time. And don't ask anything in return. And just see if your life gets any better. Guarantee you it will.
So what type of entities would these be? Dead people, the unfallen angels, the fallen angels? What all sorts of entities would be included in this for you?
Just about every type. I work with angels. I work with demons. I work with ancient gods. I work with the little people of the spirit world, animal spirits, egregores that I've created, the Watchers, the Fallen 200. I've tried to form relationships with a great many of these entities from different pantheons and practices, as well as the Loa and the Jinn. So I think that no one should stick to any one system or any one class of spirits. I think you should try to get to know as many as possible. Practice as many systems as you can, and form relationships with every pantheon of entity that you can.
Well, certainly, like when you break it down into the three that most mythologies kind of break it down into, as far as created beings, the light beings, the fire beings, and the clay beings, and when you go from one culture to another and look at the different words, and you look at maybe there's specific entities, or maybe something specific is being said by that culture. Jung talked about working with archetypes that way, certainly, and
Yeah.
although it can be kind of difficult to pile on, okay, trying to fish out from all these different things, and maybe this isn't,
Don't get too caught up in the mythology. Don't get too caught up in the classifications. All right, think about what is a spirit? What is an angel? What is a demon? You know, if it's something that you're working with in a non-physical form, then you're talking about a concentrated form of energy field that has a consciousness and a personality behind it. Okay, whether or not you think these things have physical bodies on another dimension or not, if you're working with them here in the 3D world, then you're working with them in spirit form. And so if you had an angel and a demon sitting side by side, would you be able to tell them apart? Probably not, especially since demons are supposed to be angels that have been cast out of heaven, you know, and supposedly
generally
transformed.
they're regarded different material. But if they're both being treated in the way that most people would mean by a god, then it doesn't really. Yeah, I understand why it wouldn't matter one versus the other. If you're treating something as a god, you're treating something as God, whatever it is. But there's way too many arguments about, oh no, we will use the Gaelic word or the Arabic word or the Sanskrit word, or and the other ones, so they're not the real ones.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean,
I literally found, I don't remember quite exactly where, I literally found an account in ancient India where two people, basically their favorite name of God, I guess, in both areas was God the Loving or something like that. And they ended up fighting each other. They didn't understand each other because they didn't speak each other's languages. But the people on both sides that were ruling them said basically the equivalent of, they're a bunch of wicked blasphemers. You don't need to respect them. We need to actually go to battle with them for some reason. And they ended up fighting each other. Basically, they had the same theology. They just had a different language.
Yeah, yeah. I think you'll find that more often than not. I mean, and if this group of people is slaughtering this other group of people, then they're not that spiritually evolved now, are they? It's just the human condition, and that's, I think, what we're trying to overcome. We should be trying to overcome. We should be getting to a point as a collective species, as a collective consciousness, where we no longer want to rape and murder the people in the neighboring country. We no longer want to force our religion down this other group of people's throat, because if you break it down to all just energy, then it's all the same thing. We're just calling it different shit.
Well, I hope no longer, but 200 million people killed by state-sponsored killings in a secular sense isn't exactly making it look like Christendom, they killed 25 million, so, but that's where all the problem was. It's like it's the same problem, I think. But
yeah,
but
so
yeah,
who's worse,
I
the Catholic Church or the Nazis? The Nazi regime from World War II, they didn't kill anywhere near as many people as the Catholic Church has, and that's not including child rapes and shit like that.
The Russians did well. Even though there's a lesser incident, there's people getting away with stuff. And that's all sorts of positions of power. People get away with stuff because they get in the connections, and the idea that you can, 180 years after someone dies, then their confessions are available to the public, and I don't remember when it was exactly. There was a priest that they made a discovery after he was declared a saint that he killed like 180 something people according to his own words, and he raped even more than that. He was keeping the record, and after that they kind of I don't know if this is exactly why, but after that the number of saints that the Catholic Church has made, went almost down to none. There's been 3 saints declared after that guy, I think, after that finding. Because what they declared 10,000 something, and then,
Well, yeah, I mean, if you were living back in that time period, if you were a brutal psychopath or a pedophile or something like that, what could you do professionally that would allow you to indulge all these things and get away with it? Become a priest.
and
Yeah.
find one like you, even though it's supposed to be less common, but still but the areas where it's most common are the areas where these crimes are most common anyways. America and Ireland have the highest, both make going to Taiwan look like a good place to send your kids. So but yeah, well, they were disempowered. They originally were calling for death penalties and stuff for that, and then they lost their power, and then it was like maybe some of them were afraid of losing more power, so we can't let this go public. And I've been to Mount Angel Abbey is it in Washington or is it in Oregon, or I forget exactly where it is, but they put up signs basically, talk to us before you talk to the authorities. So
That's interesting.
yeah, that has some indications. I don't like it, but
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about the psychology behind what would drive someone to want to become a Catholic priest. Okay, if you're a typical man that likes sex with women or men or farm animals, otherwise, you're not going to join a priesthood that prevents you from having sex, right? So right there, everyone has a sex drive. Everyone has something that turns them on. And if they are throwing away the possibility of ever being able to sleep with a woman, then obviously there's something else that does it for them, which leaves, usually men,
well, they're
children.
giving up to. They say that most priests and nuns in America actually do have heterosexual affairs after joining the priesthood. So,
Some type
it,
of sex, I guarantee you that.
and they're, the Protestants actually don't have lower. They have just as strong a rates of some of these problems of abuse of the priesthood. So it's this idea of paying a group of people to be just a little bit better than everybody else. I just overheard some women earlier today talking about how this man of God had positioned himself in giving his sermon or something to look up women's dresses, or the group or something. I didn't. It was in church that I know. I didn't eavesdrop on too much of the conversation, but
I doubt it.
the guy gets paid. I like the idea that from Zoroastrianism to Islam, you have this idea that the people, everybody there doing the ritual together, they're in the same boat. None of this. Oh, even if the guy knows more and all that stuff, him leading the ritual doesn't, it isn't like, oh, the ritual's worth 10 times what it is for him, and everybody. No, everybody's considered equal in the crowd, as far as what they're.
Yeah, they absolutely should be, and that should be the mentalities that we're all equal. Okay, that's why I say don't listen to me, don't listen to anyone. Take advice from people that you admire that have accomplished something similar to what you want to accomplish, but don't follow anyone. And to give you an example, I live in the Bible Belt, and we have a population of German Baptists here. They're kind of like Amish people, only they look exactly like Amish. They dress the same, only they use technology, they drive cars, they have cell phones and things like that. But a very large German Baptist community right here in the county that I live in, and they had a very large church. And the head of this church, the main preacher, the pillar of the community, He had a wife and he had like 3 small children. This guy had an affair with my stepmother, and they ran off together. He took all of the money from his family's accounts, all of the tools from their family business, and runs off with a married woman. Okay, so that's the pillar of the community, and these people are supposed to be better than us. They're supposed to have higher moral standards and rules that they live by, and that was the best of them, and that's what he did. So no one is better than anyone else, and the more you put somebody up on a pedestal, the higher you are setting them up to fall flat on their face when they prove that they're not fucking perfect. Period.
And it's certainly a, you know, other than the Mithraic sort of thing, the whole idea of putting your faith, you know, your faith in this person rather than some sort of principle or something. That's, you know, it's setting yourself up for failure. It's just a happenstance whether or not you hold your life together, and you know.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I could never like start an order or something like that. I would never want to be that guy who's put up on the pedestal that's supposed to be leading the flock. You know, I don't think anybody's fit to do that. You know, as far as following someone, a leader should not ask people to follow them. A leader should just go whichever direction he's going to go, or she, and do whatever he or she is going to do. And if they're worth a shit, then people are going to follow them because they deserve to be followed. As soon as you're standing up there recruiting people, say, "Follow me, I am the light and the way," you're fucking up right there. So yeah, I could never get into that.
That's one of the things was, you know, when you look at, you know, Gnosticism existed before Christianity and all that all that stuff. But if you look into what some of these terms, yeah, it's a whole different path. Even beyond the language argument, you look at in that context, you know, you get whole different ideas, and you know, yeah, it was never about, you know, given some examples, and you know, either you take up the cross or not. And I don't think the, you know, him predicting that he was going to get killed was really what was being said. It's, you know, it was a common symbol.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a the symbolism behind these groups is a whole other conversation in itself. When you get into like symbols of power, I mean, look, we've been kind of hitting all over Christianity during this conversation. So look at the symbol of the cross. All right, people. If you ask people, what does that symbolize? They'll say that symbolizes the sacrifice that our Savior made to save our souls. Okay, but what is the cross? The cross is an ancient torture device. It's a method of killing someone in the most brutal fashion. Okay, and they murder Jesus Christ on the cross to shut him up and to hopefully put a stop to the movement he has started that is threatening the government body, because Jesus spoke out against tyranny. He spoke out against dogma and authority. He practiced magic, raised the dead, healed the sick, made the blind man see. That's all form, that's necromancy and black magic. And speaking out against the government, that's anarchism. So I mean, if you really think about it, Jesus was one of the greatest black magician / anarchists that ever lived. So whenever they murder this guy, it doesn't have the effect that they wanted it to have. It does not crush the movement. No, it martyrs him, which makes the movement even stronger. So then the Romans have no other choice except for to get on board with this movement. So they adopt it and make Christianity. And so they just take it and twist it just enough to corrupt it, to make it a system of control and slavery, so that they can stay in power through this means instead of the old means. And they get everybody to wear the cross around their neck. And subconsciously, what that tells you is that's what happens when you speak out against authority. You get crucified. Okay, that's the subconscious method behind the crucifix. It's reminding everybody not to open their fucking mouth.
I know this is a Moroccan flag, but the sort of reminded me of the Arthurian tales, the knights that it's always pictured with the different stars and stuff like. Well, not always, but some of the drawings are pictured with the star on them. One of the knights, I thought, okay, this is like it, so that reminds me of that. But one of the reasons why I believe that these stories got Christianized rather than being left to be forgotten in their pre-Christian era forms, was that it represented a personalization of heroic deeds that one could do, rather than entirely things being vicarious. It's sort of a Luciferian sort of, they go and they seek out their own life, but they have to purify their character and do their own deeds regardless of the cost. And okay, you do get some sort of solar figures, but you don't really get quite the merging of the two like you do with the rose cross symbol. But that's sort of the message that I take with this, with this time of year. Tonight's the shortest night on this half of the globe, but it's your own light that you bring out of the darkness. And I've had some interesting dreams and visions connected to that theme. But I think one of the things I learned from studying Joseph Campbell as much as anything else, I mean, at least initially, I found out this message was all over the place too, but was that the metaphors, whenever you have a metaphor, whenever you have something mythologically said that's not true as is, there's some sort of truth or good or something that it's linked to. It's just not expressed as a literal truth. So
Yeah, you always gotta look behind the curtain, read between the lines. No one's ever going to give it to you straight. Symbolism changes over time. If you want to find out what the symbol actually meant, then go as far back in human history as you can, and you'll probably get pretty close to it. The cross was
there's the
something
problem
that
with
still fear.
Of course, there's the problem with following like etymology chain, saying that, well, different words are different things in different languages. It's like particularly the Persians and the Hindus, they used language to insult each other. It wasn't that they were necessarily deriving one from the other. They were actually using, the angel becomes the demon and the good becomes the bad. And, you say, oh, I've done this, and it becomes, I'm a pile of excrement in the other language. And, particularly those two parts of the world, you have that sort of thing going on. But at the base of it, they did have the same basic mythology that they just made their tribe's thing. But it's a complex thing if you look at it linguistically.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I definitely think it's like in the Bible. Did you know in the so-called Old Testament, it does not mention anger. What it literally says is the nostrils flare. It doesn't say, it doesn't really, it has some very physical words that are obviously terms for emotions, but it doesn't refer to emotions in sort of the same ways. And I liked the fact that when I realized what biblical Zionism isn't, this blood and soil garbage that's really, from the Nazis on, it's never gone away as a significant factor in politics. It's taken one side or the other, but I mean, it's been throughout history. I'm not denying that, but it's about being a shining example. Hewn means a shining example. It was either anything from a road sign up to a person, and it literally says in the Bible that Jerusalem doesn't even have to be part of Zion. It literally says that. So this thing about it has to be Israel, and it has to be, Jerusalem has to be the capital, and all this other stuff. That's not the Bible. I do take issue with plenty of stuff in the Bible. I don't remember where it is. Are you familiar with that thing in the Bible that's basically like, wait a second, that's voodoo. You kill a bird and you scatter around the room and you smear a yam, like a red yam, or it's one of those purification ceremonies.
I'm not entirely familiar with that, so you'd have to explain it to me.
I don't remember exact passage, but there's some it ends up being a more spiritual. It's like unicorns. Unicorns are there. It's like realm from the Goetia. Realm means unicorn in that language, but unicorn's not some cute horse thing. Whether you've seen one or not, it's not some cute horse thing. It's yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily think it's out to hurt you if you meet one of them, but the Ramin are kind of not.
Yeah, I mean, when you get into the
There's a
study
lot
of
of
scripted,
for some reason they despiritualized a lot of the Bible as more more related to the spirit world when you read it in its older languages. Although I'm well aware that there's more variance in a single chapter of Genesis than the entire Quran. For example, in its 10 dialects, you find any chapter of Genesis, you're going to find more variations, and you're going to find contradictions and stuff like that. So I'm well aware that things change back and forth. But my point was just that it was more connected to spiritual things, and
yeah. Well,
but it does get too much into the baguettes and pages and pages of what it's like Hanukkah. The reading for Hanukkah is like hours worth of reading about furniture.
Yeah. Well, if you use the Bible like a grimoire, then you can actually do some pretty cool things with it. But I mean, that's part of the whole mind fuck of the idea behind Christianity, is to trick their followers out of actually practicing magic. That all you do is glorify the murder of their savior, and that's it. He died for you, so you're good. You don't have to do magic. You don't really have to do anything except for pray and put your money in the collection plate, and don't violate any of these rules we're putting on you. So it's tricking people out of actually evolving spiritually. But if you overlook all of that and you use the Bible like a grimoire, like the dusting your feet curse that Jesus gives in the Bible, that's a real thing, dude. If you have a dispute with an establishment like a business or a church or a school, whenever you leave that premises, if you turn around, take your shoes off, and dust the gunk off your shoes facing towards that establishment, and then just turn around and leave, then that establishment will cease to exist pretty quickly. So that's a very effective curse that Jesus.
Some people maybe. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. Go.
No, I was just saying that's very effective.
Maybe where I've done a lot of what I call like the Goetia word, and I'm not reciting the parts that you have to do things in the name of Jesus or anything. I'm not reciting those parts. But I've rendered the entire Goetia, the basic Goetia. I've took different versions of the Goetia, by the way. And one of the things I did was find verses connected to everything in there. And so yeah, I've ritually used all that material that I've gone over, and it's you see you feel things that if you were to look it up on I've tried to explain certain experiences in chemical terms. So WebMD sometimes has told me what drugs I was overdosing on, that sort of stuff. But yeah, you'll see different colors, patterns emerge, certain different presences, certain stuff, and it's like, and then sometimes you'll end up having. But one of the interesting things about using a grimoire stuff as a path working is that you may pick up the thing and say, I like this one, and this one, because I want this. But if you work through each of them, you're going to find stuff in your categories that you didn't expect from other parts of the thing. And it's sort of the way of okay, it's not it's obviously better than nothing, the idea of praying for health and progeny, that sort of thing. But whether or not one has a situation, if you're doing your thing, not only is it going to be make you better for the magic, as it would be called, to do your thing when you need it, but yeah, it does stuff for you that you might not expect.
Yeah.
Or even be asking for. But it's like if you forget yourself, well, okay, camaraderie. Even if you're not calling up an entity, entities in an area will like what you're doing and come hang out with you, and sometimes, you know, talk to you. I've met beings that have like introduced themselves that way. That is like, I wasn't, you know, praying to the spirit of the place or anything like that, but some spirit of the place made itself known, and you know.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's like moving into a new house. You know, I moved into a new house not long ago, and whenever we looked at the house, I didn't notice anything walking through it. I didn't notice any spiritual presence at all. As soon as I signed that lease, and it was mine, um, entered the house, and it was a very, uh, very powerful presence that you could feel. Just very curious, like, oh, okay, you know, you're going to live here now too. You know, you could sense it, and the other people that lived here could sense it as well. And so the right hand path approach would be to come over here before I moved in and exercise and banish the whole property, right? And then call forth the entities that I'm familiar with to reside here. So I wanted to take the black magician approach, the left hand approach. And so I came over here before we moved in and laid out a circle in the basement and summoned forth the entities that already reside here, the land spirits, the entities of the property, as well as the ones that were residing within this house, and offered them a sacrifice and a proposal of friendship. You know, I will acknowledge and respect you if you will in turn respect me and my loved ones and protect this home and all those who reside within it. And the instant that I did that, this place felt like it was my home, whereas before I felt like an intruder here. So it's always better to make allies with something than enemies. And if something goes out of its way to get your attention, like what you were just talking about, you know, entity coming forth and introducing itself, that's a big fucking deal. Okay, for an advanced entity, concentrated energy form with a consciousness to make itself known to you, that's like extending a hand, you know. And you definitely want to pay attention to that. And if you can make allies, then I recommend you do so, because it's better to have spiritual allies than enemies. That's why exorcists only live for about 10 or 15 years once they start performing exorcisms, because you're making enemies with demonic kings and etc. And that's never a good thing, no matter how protected you think you are.
Well, and particularly a lot of aspect of exorcism, I don't agree with in that the idea that okay, if you're trying to promote somebody to have some sort of change in their life, and then, you know, they have the power to, you know, operate themselves better, you know, more in line with what they were looking for again. That's one thing, but so many of the exorcisms, and that's why people get beaten to death and stuff in the middle of exorcisms, because they're like, you know, my authority over you, and, you know, better. It's like, I haven't taken part in any exorcism like that or witnessed anything like that directly firsthand. I've seen the aftermath of some of that, but I've seen other types of exorcism, and it doesn't go over with what you know. No one's tied down, her, you know, starving to death or anything, you know.
Yeah, you know, I've performed exorcisms. I've actually got a pretty good deal of experience with things like that. And yeah, the that's not always the best way to handle it. I mean, there are entities that we cannot make allies with, and in that case, it's you have no choice but to use force. But if a person comes to me and they're possessed, you know, and it's not just me suspecting they're possessed. If I actually put them through certain tests and determine, yes, this person is possessed, there's no doubt that something is taking root, some other consciousness is taking root within them, then yeah, you can go straight to the exorcism part if you want to, and you're probably it's probably not going to end well. You're going to end up getting attacked by that person, or they're going to end up getting injured in the process of exorcising them. But if someone came to me and they were possessed and it was not going well for them, it was not a happy possession, then the best thing to do is to try to negotiate with that spirit. And so if I want to get that spirit out of that person, I'm going to lay out 2 circles and 1 triangle. Circle across from my circle and a triangle with the point facing me, and have them sit across from me. And I'm going to evoke that spirit out of their body into that triangle before me. And then once that happens, you've removed that spirit from their physical body. Okay, now you have to prevent it from jumping back into them, which is where the negotiation part comes in. Say, okay, what is it going to take for you to release this person? You know, if I make you a sacrifice of burning flesh and blood, would that be sufficient for you to leave this person in peace? Or would you be willing to partner with this person on a friendly basis on these conditions? Each month they will make you offerings, and in turn you will stop making them sick and make them healthy, wealthy, and happy. You know, it's always better to resolve these things peacefully, because if you just drive that spirit out and it goes wherever it goes, and you've made an enemy that could be more powerful than you realize on the astral. So if that's not an option, if you try these things and it does not work, you can try the Catholic priest exorcism all you want. You're not going to get anywhere with that. Compelling them in the name of power of Christ compels you, all that shit. They're going to laugh at you.
One of my
Do what?
I thought there was a moment to pause, but one of the things when I redid the pentagram rite was that okay, invoking that stayed an option, but instead of banishing, evoking was the intention that I got with it, because I'm not, you know, yeah, the preemptive banishing and all that. I don't identify with that, and it's like, why would I call anything up that you may decide later, but at least in an initial sense, I'm definitely not calling anything up that I plan on banishing later. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't do a lot of banishments. You know, that's one thing if I'm sitting in my house and I feel a presence, unwelcome presence, try to invade my territory or invade my territory. You know, that's one thing. But you know, the entities that I work with, I don't banish them. I don't dismiss them. You know, I consider that to be disrespectful. You know, if I, summon Belial to make a sacrifice or something like that to him, I don't say, okay, now I'm done with you. You know, get on out of here. Hell no. I want them around. They are welcome to remain with me as long as they want to. So why would I banish them? That's the difference between the Western approach and I couldn't even say Eastern approach, but the Western magician tries to assert power and control over these spirits and force them to do what he wants and constrain them, and that does not work out in the long run. You want to make allies. You want to be friends.
And it's like the spirits aren't going to fall. I mean, me standing right next to somebody isn't going to fall for it. The spirits aren't going to fall for it either. When it's like one of the flaws of the Necronomicon. If you twist the hand gesture, you're basically, forming the word law with your hand, and basically say, you do all this sorcery, and then you're saying, oh no, monotheist here, leave me alone. It's like,
Yeah.
they know what you are. They know what you just did. It's
Yeah. You know who I love watching sometimes? Bob Larson, the televangelist exorcist, Bob Larson. You know what I'm talking about?
yeah. I've been trying to get an interview with that guy.
I want to go on his show. I want to go because you remember he had Nicholas Schreck and Zena LeVay on his show, The Showdown with Satanism, like 30 fucking years ago. That was
Yeah,
awesome.
that's when I found out the guy existed, and
Yeah.
and it's also one that had a difficult moment there. The as I said, I kind of like bounced on the stairs. So the okay, if Bob Larson does something.
I was bringing up his exercise.
The guy I remember it was in the 90s. He made $45 million that year, and he was basically claiming like a 40-something thousand dollar income. All his planes and all that other stuff. That's just
Kenneth Copeland.
He got it even worse. The guy had 40 multi-million-dollar planes, and they were and was it Insider Edition caught him at the airports like,
yeah, Kenneth Copeland. I saw that.
Can't you fly coach? And it's like, why not one plane? So, but
that's what real evil looks like. That guy, right?
Worth $1 billion, and now he's like, I mean, these some of these people are still worth an awful lot of money, even though they've lost most of their value. But people are starting to see through that. That's you know,
Yeah, well, the reason I was bringing that up is this guy has become famous by doing exorcisms on people in his church. And if you actually watch, like those people are not possessed. If that guy got a hold of a real possessed person, he would get his face ripped off. I mean, first of all, someone who's possessed by a real
yeah,
demon,
it seems to be what they're you know what they're prompted to do as much as anything, and it's like
it's
the whole
conditioned response, and they're acting it out. Okay, it's a
yeah.
form of psychology what they're doing. But there's he's not actually speaking exorcisms. He's just saying Jesus is the boss. You know that, right? Now get out of this person. He'll raise his voice and they'll blah, blah, do whatever they do, and then
Well,
all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm all better.
or
That's
any of
not.
those ones where you have a priestly class kind of going and doing that way. It's basically what they're conditioned to say. And
Yeah,
um,
yeah, they've been watching the show. They know what they're supposed to act
it's
like.
it's like Benny Hinn. It took after he quit his music career to become a preacher. He MC Hammer started off as a preacher, then music, then went back to a preacher. So some of them, but yeah, this charisma that's built up by this guy being a TV figure for so long. It's you know if you show up to his seminar, you're going to have a spiritual encounter, and you know it's like some of those past life regression ones. It's like if you don't have it now, if you don't have it, I mean, it's a lot more skillful than that. But it's like if you don't, turn, and try to stress, and you're going to have the experience. Better cry and all this. You're going to remember your past life now, or you're not going to remember it, and then you know
Yeah.
people all over the room break out and start having shaking
It's
on the
all an
back.
act. It's all theater, dude. Real violent possession is like fucking terrifying. Okay, not just for the person that's experiencing it, but for everyone who's in the room. And you're in real danger when you do that, and that's why I don't recommend the traditional forceful exorcism.
Well,
It,
it's like I witnessed. Well, the guy had already killed a couple people, but a murderer before he committed suicide. There was something. It was like there was something with him, and after he died, it was like it was left. It was left in the area where he killed himself.
yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the very first experience I had with witnessing a real possession. I was a teenager. I was just about to leave for the army, and I'd never seen anything like this before. I'd experimented with magic and spells from 10 years old, but I was not a magician back then. And I didn't really know what I was seeing at the time. And, this was a friend of mine that was possessed, and very, very meek and mild person, tiny little guy, not violent, not a fighter at all. He hauled off and punched a sliding glass window and gave himself a boxer's break. Okay, that's where he broke all four of these bones in the back of his hand, and it was a compound fracture. These bones were broke in half and overlapping these. Okay, and he's sitting there saying it feels good, and he's clicking the bones back and forth while he's laughing. And his pupils are so big that there's no more crystal blue in this guy's eyes, and the whites of his eyes are bloodshot red. And he's speaking in a voice that's not his, and he's not feeling this pain, or he's taking pleasure out of this pain. And so a few weeks later, it was right after I left for the army, I get a letter telling me that he's committed suicide. And so what he did was he went into his basement and he threw a rope over the rafter, tied it off, put it around his neck, and just sat down. Just picked his feet up and sat there and slowly strangled to death. But before he did that, he wrote a letter. He said that the reason he was killing himself is because he could not escape the demon that was chasing him. And then he drew a picture of the demon, a very demonic looking picture, and that was it. No one, no one was able to help this guy. He was in mental institutions. He was taking psych meds and everything else. That was a real possession, in my
That's
opinion.
the problem with. I mean, okay, there's an establishment clause under the law. You can, they can't claim, because of having a difference of religion, that you're experiencing anything along the lines of mental illness. It's your right as an American. Not that well upheld of a right. There was somewhere that I walked on the way to the library, and literally missionaries knew what was going on with this office and would actually try to pick up on patients. It seemed like they knew. At least they figured out, as they went around and talked to people. It's like, wait, around here, let's see who comes out of the office and talk to those people. And if you weren't a member of that church, if you were a member of that church, it was okay, you could deal with it. But if you weren't a member of that church and you had certain experiences, you were crazy somehow.
Yeah.
So it's perfectly acceptable, nothing to fight, but people basically tell you. And I, in the same city and later across the bridge in the next city over, this one woman, nothing ever hurt. None of these things that she encountered ever hurt her. But it was not what she was taught in church to be on the side of. Not that these things ever did anything wrong to her or suggested anything that would be harmful to her, but so she was terrified that something, that they were going to hurt her or something. No indication of that ever, but basically she was schizophrenic because she had to hold on to her beliefs that didn't match her experience.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people saying
no matter how hard they drugged her, it didn't take away anything.
Yeah. Well, like I said, a lot of the people sitting in mental institutions are not crazy. A lot of them are dealing with spiritual things, and some of them are crazy. I mean, whenever somebody comes to you, that's part of why I have to sit down and talk with people whenever they come to me for help, because I have to determine whether we're dealing with an actual presence, spiritual presence, or we're dealing with a mental illness. It doesn't mean I can't help them if we're dealing with mental illness, but it's a totally different type of ritual that I would need to do to improve that condition. So, if someone has delusions about what's wrong with them, that's like the first part is to diagnose it correctly. And a lot of the people sitting in loony bins are suffering from things like possession, and they've been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And then if you want to get scientific, you can say, what's the difference between schizophrenia and possession? Well, not a whole lot. Whether it's something, a consciousness, a personality that they've created and given power to, then you're talking about being possessed by your own egregor, or if it's an actual demon or angel or anything else that's possessing this person, then there's different ways to go about dealing with that. And it's figuring out what it is the first step. So,
well, are you familiar with Carl Gustav Jung?
Yeah.
There's this one story where there's a patient and he's like, I don't have the spiritual authority to say whether or not she's experiencing this spirit snake. We just can't let her try to cut herself open to remove the thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's not how you get rid of a demon, guys. You do not cut yourself open to get rid of it. And a lot of the things possessing people are not actually demons. Okay, anytime they think of something as being evil, they're like, oh, it's a demon. Demon, daemon, teacher, angel is a messenger. So I mean, the reason that demons are demonized is because the establishment does not want you to learn the secrets to magic and mysticism. And the demon or daemon, who is a teacher, that is what they want to do, is teach you how to evolve. So that's why they're misconstrued as demons instead of teachers.
Paralysis or other sorts of experiences, that nightmare documentary back a handful of years ago, something like that, made some very good points. And like so many of these experiences, people just preemptively fight them, and it's just horrible. But the ones that decide, maybe I shouldn't fight it, and it's like it can even turn the complete opposite.
Yeah. Well, okay, so sleep paralysis is a real thing, obviously, and night terrors, which includes sleep paralysis, like spiritual attacks, that's a real thing also. Okay, so if someone is being attacked, and experiencing sleep paralysis, there are key indications that will let them know whether or not they're dealing with an external force. People who are dealing with external forces, they will typically open their eyes and see and feel an entity sitting on top of them, crushing the life out of them, draining the life force out of them. And then the following day, they will be weak, tired, and sick. This thing has instilled fear with them and then fed off of their energy. It's a parasite. It's like a vampiric spirit that is attacking these people in their sleep. Okay, so if you are dealing with an external force, then there is a certain way to handle that. And I used to suffer from this, and I overcame this. That's why I can talk about it. And then there's just regular sleep paralysis, which is where you wake up and you just happen to become conscious before you fully come out of that REM state, and your body is still asleep and you can't move for a few seconds. But if you open your eyes and there's a shadow figure sitting on top of you, choking you, sucking the life out of you, and you're sick the next day, then you are dealing with an external force, and you need to do something about that. The people who come to me that are suffering from this phenomena, I will give them a symbol to put on the wall above their bed, and that's the fifth seal of Mars. You can find that in the Keys of Solomon, the Goetia. That symbol inflicts pain on these types of entities. So if you've got that displayed, charged, and open in your bedroom, then they are not going to come in. Or if you get it tattooed on your body, like I have. Once I did that, the night terrors, the sleep attacks all stopped. So yeah, it's
I definitely understand there are physical situations where people are more likely to have experiences. It's like, okay, with using both definitions of the word sorcery, one, the ritual drug use, two, the working with the jinn and all that sort of stuff, and maybe even the third thing of putting something to chance. If that's all combined with music, people are most likely to have spiritual, some sort of spiritual awareness as just about anything. I can't think of anything that kind of seems to have as high of a percentage of something's going to happen as that. But then you can, it's not everyone or every time necessarily either. People can be high as a kite and called up whatever, and it's still, they're not aware of anything.
Yeah.
But sleep paralysis, being a child, near-death experiences. Have you had a near-death experience?
Yeah, I did experience a flat line at one point in the beginning of my spiritual practice, and that lasted for an unknown length of time. Whenever I came to, I noticeably felt the blood start pumping again, the heat going throughout my extremities. So I have experienced that. I've never been in like a car accident and been dead for any length of time. This was inflicted by an entity, and I had to consent to it beforehand. Pretty freaking bizarre. It's one of those things I don't really talk about much because I wouldn't believe it if someone told me that they experienced that. But my experience and my reality, that's the most sense I can make of it. So I was very different after that experience. It was like I was a completely different person overnight, and that's why I feel like through these path workings, at some point we die and are reincarnated right back into this physical body, and you've reached another stage that you're working on in your spiritual evolution at that point. So
I mean, being raised with at least knowing of the born again sort of terminology, and it's a whole different thing when you kind of engage yourself mystically and go through stuff. And
yeah, that's probably the most intense thing you can do.
Speaking of your master key, it kind of to me bears more of a resemblance of sort of something you might see in Germany or something Norse or something like that. Is there any connection to the North or anything in particular that's kind of?
Well, that's all open for speculation. All right, so I've actually, let's see, I've got it right here on a piece of paper for people that don't know what we're talking about. I can show it to them. This is what I call the master key. All right, so there's a lot of symbolism in here. you've got like these horn type symbols here that represents power, royalty. You've got eyes, you've got lightning bolts, you've got arrows for strength, things like that. So I mean, there's all kinds of symbolism in this seal. But the way I received this, like I didn't just like make this up or sit down and design it. Like you know, it was right after I'd done a possession rite with Shemyaza during the solar eclipse of 2017. It was shortly after that. I was taking a shower, and I step out of the shower, and it was like a flash of lightning went off in my eyeballs, and this seal was just like burned into my retinas. So I turn around, pick up a marker, and draw it on the bathroom mirror, and that's how I got the seal. And so then I had to figure out what it was and what it did. And so of course I started experimenting, and it turned out to be like a whole path working around that seal. And the best way I can describe that is one, it's a gateway, spiritual gateway to the best of my understanding to the realm of the Watchers, the 200 fallen angels in the Book of Enoch. That is a key to access their power, and that they can come through, the ones that are named as well as the ones that are unnamed. And we only know about 20 of their names, so that's very valuable as far as working with all of them. The other thing that it is, it's a symbol of universal primal power, and it allows you to tap into not only that primal power, but to concentrate your own personal power, the power of the magician. So that's why I say it's like a universal seal of power, because you can literally use that in any type of magical operation, whether it's to heal somebody, to cast a curse, or to cause a thunderstorm. People have caused thunderstorms with this seal. So there's nothing you can't really do with it or incorporate it into. And that's why I say it's the most valuable piece of spiritual technology that I've ever discovered. And really the only thing contingent upon them giving that to me was if I shared it with everyone else. So that's why I've put the medallions and things like that out there. But yeah, that's a really deep wormhole to dive into there, and I'm still figuring out what all I can do with that.
Well, certainly symbols have multiple, you know, not only is there no good or bad symbols, but, there's, different things for different people with symbols, and that's one of the great things about using symbols.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like I like I don't really hear much of anybody else doing this, but I like the Goetia, the Grimorium Varium. I look at the patterns of the symbols, and at least if I'm going to do something with it, some meaning connected to symbol. It's not just it's a symbol. It's just a ritual element. I mean that's sufficient as is, but you know what I mean. I try to figure out some meaning associated with the thing before I.
Yeah, absolutely. And different symbols mean different things and throughout different cultures. It just I guess part of it's dependent upon the beholder. We're all creating our own reality, and what a symbol means to me might mean something different to you. It might trigger different energy within different people. So yeah. I mean that's something we could probably talk about all day.
Similar to the first, and sometimes produces the same response. But what do you think the meaning of life is?
The meaning of life? Yeah, that's like the first question you asked me. I have no idea, dude. I'm trying to figure that out, just like everybody else walking around in this third dimension. I think different lives have different meanings. Different lives have different purposes. I think some lives don't have any meaning or purpose, and that if we're in a video game, then that could mean, I don't know that my neighbor doesn't cease to exist whenever I see them walk into their house, outside of my perception. So if we're in a video game, then how do we know that everyone that we see walking around the mall, stumbling around, pecking on their cell phone, how do we know that all of those are major players in this game? What if each is individual to the individual? I don't know.
I definitely understand that sentiment with things getting better and better as far as what we can, do in that respect, or program into people through our technology. That's, and people dying playing video games because they forget that they're playing a video game and have to, don't eat or don't go to the bathroom or something,
But, I think the meaning of life is just the experience of life, really. I mean, we for whatever reason, we're here. We're in these physical bodies. We can experience physical pleasure and physical pain. And, I think life should be abundant. I think we should all be healthy, wealthy, and happy, and at least strive to get some measure of that. But life has got to be about the experience. And if we were food to another species, if David Icke's right and the reptilians are, eating people and ruling the world, then to them our life has no other meaning other than a food source and a labor source. But what's the meaning of a chicken's life? I got a coop full of chickens out back that I raise and utilize for food and ritual sacrifice. What's the meaning of their life? To me, the meaning of their life is to be utilized for food and ritual purposes. But if you ask that chicken, what's the meaning of its life? He's going to tell you so. He's not going to say the meaning of my life is to feed that asshole in the house there that's going to chop my head off tomorrow. You're going to get a totally different answer. So maybe there's no meaning, maybe it just depends on what perspective you're looking at that life from. I don't know.
Do you consider yourself as having encountered the dead?
Encountered the dead, as in working with dead,
like
spirits of dead people?
Yeah, spirits of dead people, not per se if you've encountered a corpse or something. That's
oh yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay, so everything that exists leaves an imprint on the ionosphere. Using special cameras, they can photograph a building that was torn down 100 years ago, and it'll look like it's still standing there with the special camera. And so I figure that us humans leave an imprint on this reality as well. We leave an imprint of our consciousness. So if you were going to go out back and, evoke Leonardo da Vinci, then you're going to get like an astral copy of his consciousness. So, I mean, the closest experience I've had with the dead, there was a man that I knew when he was alive who was executed a couple of years ago. And on the night of his execution, shortly afterwards, I encountered what I considered to be his ghost. Just swung by to say goodbye. And that was very strange for me. I was not expecting that. Nothing like that had ever happened before. But I was very, very most definitely communing with his spirit during that time for a few minutes. So I've encountered things like that. But I'm not like a necromancer or anything. I don't have a title or a label. I do whatever I need to do. If that includes working with spirits of the dead, then so be it. And same goes for angels, demons, Jinn, and Loa. Whatever the operation calls for is what I become.
Have you experienced prophecy?
Prophecy. Yes. In small ways pertaining to my own life, as well as large ways pertaining to global things. Yeah, I'm not like a prophet or anything. And if you think about it, prophecy, the nature of prophecy is self-fulfilling. I think all prophecy is self-fulfilling. And that's because prophecy programs and manipulates the collective consciousness. So if you prophesize a doomsday apocalypse around this point in time, and for thousands of years, everybody's being indoctrinated to believe that this apocalypse is going to take place, then on a collective scale, the whole fucking world is manifesting that apocalypse, and the prophecy is going to manifest in one way or another. So, yeah, I mean, as far as communing with entities, saying, this is going to happen, or if you do this, this is going to happen. Yeah, I've experienced that, and it's been accurate most of the time. And I think the ones that aren't accurate are just misinterpreted by us.
Well, you have some people, like, for example, with Thelema, that say that, okay, on this date, Aleister Crowley, the apocalypse was really talking about something else, and this is what happened there. And so his vision about the world of fire, well, that's not quite the way to put it, but you know what I mean. Then there's, particularly with like the Enochian magic, and this is what makes people so afraid of Enochian magic, is that it's supposed to bring about the apocalypse. Although that became a rumor, but basically a personal apocalypse. John Dee was hoping with all this to bring the experience back that he thought was part of the movement to start with, that just wasn't there. And, you know, so there's, you know, definitely the personal apocalypse being brought forth.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it can occur on different levels, you know, and it's all open to interpretation and how people see it and how it integrates into their personal reality. So, I mean, you know, if chances are, if you were to just make up some bullshit and write it in a book and publish it and get people to read it on a massive scale, detailing a prophecy, if enough people believe in that prophecy, then it's going to manifest, I think.
Well, Nostradamus was an expert at making vague stuff that would probably eventually come true.
Yeah,
It doesn't
that's
really
a
any.
other level there. That guy, you know, now Nostradamus was very real, dude. The things he prophesized happened, and they are still happening. And you know, he would go into these trances, like he would go lay down on a table and just boom, go to sleep, and people would sit there and write down what he was saying. You know, the same thing with Edgar Casey. They call him the sleeping prophet. These guys, I think, were going into an altered state of consciousness where they were tapping into consensual reality, the fluid reality where all time is present.
Well, definitely, both of them listed what I've learned or effective methods of going into trance.
Yeah. So I mean, they're looking at everything that's already
it's
happened.
right out of one of those Solomonic grimoires, the sort of thing that Nostradamus went through. But his study of symbolism and stuff, he, you know, basically everything. Okay, there's a couple things I don't think have come true repeatedly, but pretty much everything, except something to happen on a very particular date that's still to come. Other than that, it's all came true in one way or another.
Yeah, well, it's like they were tapping into the Akashic record, you know, the record of time and space and reality. You know, if all time is present on, say, the fourth dimension or whatever, that means everything that's ever going to happen has already happened. So these prophets, they were just looking into the future and seeing what had already happened. And then by prophesizing that, we could either, you know, potentially change it in some way, or just let people know that it's coming. But yeah, I definitely think that's possible. If you can go into that altered state and get a glimpse of time and space from from a higher perspective, then yeah, you could foretell the future, and you could also view the past as it has really happened. You could tell us how the pyramids were built. You could tell us how the human race was created, you know, because it's already happened. They're just essentially remote viewing through time is what I think they were doing.
Have you experienced deja vu?
Oh yeah, all the time, dude. That trips me out when that happens, and it's you know, I might go 6 months without experiencing that, and then I might experience it 2 or 3 times within a week. That's really weird. I've really wondered about what is happening there. Um, if you think that we live in a multiverse and there's another version of you living in another reality that's slightly different than this one, then maybe it's just like a glitch where you're connecting to that consciousness in this other reality, or maybe it's something you've already experienced in a dream and forgotten about. And so then when it happens, it just triggers that sensation of having already been there and done that. Yeah, I've experienced that a lot of times.
Well, definitely one of the interesting things they find out is our brain processes stuff when we sleep. So, I mean, the better you are at thinking over things and all that sort of thing,
Yeah.
you know, you're bound to have come up with stuff with possibilities, and you know, more and more possible. That's why it seems that people who get into a spiritual life, an active spiritual life, not just one of worship, but you know, otherwise, you definitely see more deja vu and coincidences and that sort of thing sort of happen, is because, you know, they're actively working through that stuff, and they may not be conscious of some of what they figured out, but they figured out stuff. And
yeah, I mean, it's crazy reality we live in, dude. It really is. So, I mean, it's endless mystery, and those of us who try to explore those mysteries will never get bored, because no matter how much I learn, I realize that there's so much more I don't know. So.
Miracles. Have you witnessed a miracle or manifested a miracle or?
Yeah. Another one of those things I don't really talk about much because there's no way to prove it unless you were there to witness it. Um, that's how that is. But to give an example, really the miracles or things that I've done that I consider to be miracles have been in the art of healing diseases and things like that. If someone has a cancer tumor and you perform a ritual to rid them of that tumor and then it magically disappears, then that's a miracle in my book. And I think most people would consider that a miracle as well. The most bizarre thing that's ever happened during ritual, in a ritual that I performed, I had a friend who broke a bone in the top of her left foot, and that bone lodged sideways and started to calcify improperly. And as a result of this, she could not feel her toes and she could not move her toes. She had a great deal of pain in the top of her foot, the area where the broken bone was. So she had x-rays and everything of this, and she was scheduled to have surgery. They were going to go in and break that bone and reset it. She asked me if I could come lay some mojo on her foot, is how she put it. Not a magician herself, but a spiritual practitioner, very open to what I do. And I said, well, I don't know if I can fix a broken bone, but anything's possible. So let's try it. Why the fuck not? If you're not scared to try it, I'm not scared to try it. So let's do it. So I go to her house. Her husband's a total skeptic. He's sitting there like being snarky and kind of smiling while I'm setting up the ritual space and whatnot. And which I took amusement in because those are the people who take off running whenever shit gets real during a ritual. But so anyway, I laid out the universal circle, and I laid a triangle in the center of that. I set her up nice and comfortable on the floor and had her prop her foot up in the middle of this triangle. I then drew the sigil of Raphael on a piece of paper and stuck that to the ceiling and told her to stare at that during the ritual. And then I took an eyeliner pen and I drew the sigil of Raphael on her foot, right over where the break was on the injury. And then I proceeded to evoke Raphael, pull him into the room, into the triangle. I pricked my finger and anointed his sigil with blood. And I simply asked him to reach inside her and heal her foot. It wasn't specific. I was just asking him to reach in and fix the problem. And so at that point, when he shows up, he takes control of the operation. At that point, I'm like a puppet, just doing what I'm compelled to do. And so a force like buckled my knees, and I dropped to my knees, and I just leaned forward and placed my hands on top of her foot, just lightly set them there. And I felt like my body caught on fire at that point. Like I felt this immense heat engulf my body. And I felt this heat coming down my arms through my hands into her foot. Okay. And so at that point, it felt like boiling water underneath the skin of her foot. It got really hot, and I could feel all the muscles and nerves and tendons twitching underneath her skin. And she starts screaming. Like this lady laying on the floor, fucking writhing in pain and screaming. My wife is holding her. Her husband is climbing the walls, freaking the fuck out. And she's writhing in agony, but she never moved her foot. She kept it still. The whole rest of her body was flailing around, but she never moved her foot. Okay, so then this bone pops so loud that everyone could hear it. It sounded like a bone breaking. And I felt that bone move about an eighth to a quarter of an inch underneath the skin. And then it continued to get even hotter. And this lasted for about 30 seconds, the whole thing. And at that point, it was done. It was over. Immediately after the ritual, she was no longer in pain. She could move her toes. She could feel her toes. Okay. She goes back to the doctor to do another x-ray. And they're like, oh my God, we don't know how to explain this, but we don't need to do surgery. The bone is exactly where it needs to be. And not only that, but it's already calcified, which should take 7 weeks. This thing completely calcified in 3 weeks. So to me, that's a miracle. I mean, that's breaking a bone and resetting it and fusing it back together. And physically, I didn't do anything to her. I just drew the sigil and spoke the conjurations, made the petition, and allowed the energy to flow through me. So that's the most mind-blowing thing that I've experienced in real time during ritual that I would call miracle.
Is there any sort of metaphysical experience that affected you psychologically, sensually, or on a different plane that any sort of category that we have not that you don't think we've covered?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, all this stuff has affected me psychologically. I feel like every time I do a ritual or a path working, I change dramatically. So all of them have affected me that way. As far as things we haven't covered, undergoing voluntary possession, that's the big one right there. Like those who experience perfect possession, as it's called, where you totally merge your body and consciousness with the consciousness of the spirit, co-inhabit the body peacefully, is how I put it. At that point, you have two spirits in one body, and they merge together, and you get to where you can't tell the difference between yourself and the entity. That will be the most dramatic experience that I think most magicians ever have, as far as spiritual evolution, psychological change, physical change, and magical abilities being acquired and learned. That's the most intense thing. The other
Well,
thing.
definitely the Yzot in particular. They've one of their goals that they talk about is the merging of the fire beings and the clay beings, and yeah, that's definitely one of the goals. That it's the perfect merging with these entities,
Yeah.
with Malakaos and other entities.
Yeah, it'll change the way people look. I think it changes them on a genetic level, on a molecular level. We're all fluid energy if you get right down to the molecules and atoms. So yeah, it's very possible to change someone's appearance even. And so if a man undergoes possession with a feminine deity, then he's going to become more feminine. His features will become more feminine. Same thing if a woman undergoes possession with a really masculine spirit like Belial, she's going to become very masculine. So yeah, I think that will be the most impactful experience that most people have. And if you ever die the shaman's death, as it's put, that would be the other one that changes the most, in my opinion.
Is there anything that's you've mentioned visual and senses of heat and stuff like that, and presences, I think. But is there any category that you'd say hasn't been part of your experience? I don't know if you mentioned hearing anything in particular, but so.
I've only heard an audible voice a couple of times. That's where that's in consensual reality, to where if we're sitting in a room, we both would hear the same thing. That's only happened a couple of times. Typically, these beings will communicate with you telepathically. I've never had a spirit just poof out of thin air like Darth Vader on a hologram. Never seen that. I've seen shadows. I've seen manifestations in fire, manifestations in smoke. I have pictures of these things, videos of these things, but I've never had like a solid manifestation, just like poof, there's a person standing in the triangle. I'll get a face in the fire or a face in the smoke, along with a telepathic message. I've felt entities touch me quite a bit, like graze past me. I've had them, grab a hold of me a few times. I've experienced sexual experiences with sexual spirits, like succubi. That's really fucking crazy.
You said messages. Are they all in English? Or are they in other particular languages, unknown languages with even unknown meanings? Or
yes, that has happened quite a bit, more often than not. Most of the time, when I've heard a spirit try to speak to me, at first it sounds like just alien gobbledygook coming through. And then it's like you have to get in that altered state in order for your brain to decode it. Like it comes through almost backwards, like reverse speech. That's a good way to describe it. A lot of the messages I've had come through, it's like the being is talking in reverse, and that gets translated somewhere in the back of our heads, and through altered state, we can hopefully make sense of what's coming through, or translate that into English or forward speech. But yeah, dude. A lot of times when they speak, you're not gonna understand what the hell they're saying. And, you can even get like EMF shit or EVP machines and get spirits talking. A lot of times it just comes through like alien gibberish. And yeah, so that happens.
Well, well, sometimes I feel like speaking in tongues, as it is called. But I don't know. I just trusted the material. I basically shared a couple hundred chants and basically gave even more people mystical names, and then I started getting translations for all of it. But at first, it was just chants for maybe 200 entities, and how to name some humans. That's I had no meaning associated with whatever. I just felt that it was something that I should get down and maybe share. So
yeah, well, a lot of times it's not going to actually be like a word that you get in English. Okay, a lot of times, okay, so when we speak, or the human voice box emits a frequency unlike anything else. And so like the power is in the sound. Okay, when you speak a magic chant, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a language. It's the sound that speaking those words or those sounds make. It's the frequency that triggers a response in this holographic reality. I mean, as far as like true names of spirits, I think the name is the frequency. The sound that your voice box makes when you speak the name of that spirit is what tunes you into the frequency of that spirit, that energy force or field that you're tapping into to perform the ritual. So,
intention as much as anything else, because it's like if you look at some of the, particularly when tradition has changed what a name is, it's like some of the names of the demons the older versions were a lot nicer in the meaning, and then they become something. But people don't have per se the intention. Oh, I'm calling up my enemy, but that literally could be the translation of what they're saying, but they don't have the effect as if they literally intended to call up their enemy.
Yeah, well, that's how things change over time. That's where you get into disinformation.
Like, you now have people calling themselves. Apache means enemy. Is it Apache that means enemy? And it's like no Native American would have called themselves that, and some people want to call themselves Apache now.
I don't know. I've heard someone talk about this before, but I don't know the correct answer to that, so I don't want to misspeak. But I think you're right. It's one of those names that means enemy. But yeah.
Well, actually, there's a few of them that they changed to be something different. A lot of them are just mispronounced and all that stuff, but some of them are literally changed into something bad that the people want to call themselves.
Yeah, it's probably done deliberately, but by whoever's wanting to demonize that people. So, yeah.
Do you have any clothing? Do you have any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. All right. Yeah. I guess we have been on for quite a while, so I'm going to have to jump off here pretty soon. Closing thoughts. Okay. So everybody that practices magic or is going to watch this show or other channels like it, they're all walking their own individual paths. They're all trying to find their own way and figure out the answers to some of these questions you've asked me, like the meaning of life and why we're here, things like that. So, I mean, it's something that we kind of touched on earlier. I would say that don't follow any person or group. Don't worship a guru or a preacher. Cut your own path. Learn things from people who have done things that you respect and admire. Okay, learn what it is that they have to teach that can help you cut your own path in this reality. And the other thing I would say is that you have to actually practice magic. You have to actually do the ritual in order to get results. I have a lot of people come to me and they're like, hey, JS, I'm reading all these books. I've hired people to do rituals for me, and I'm still just not getting it. I'm not getting to where I want to be. I want to be a badass magician, but I'm just not getting it. And I'm like, well, what rituals have you done yourself? And every time the answer is, well, I haven't actually done any rituals myself. I'm like, okay, well, you need to find your drug of choice. Figure out what it is that really gets your rocks off and learn and do everything in that field. And then whenever you meet the standard, then surpass that standard. Find your drug of choice, explore it, learn everything about it, and then pioneer that field even further than it's already been done. So for me, my drug of choice that I started out with was healing sick people. I really got off on that. I felt good about that. I would experiment on people who were suffering from illnesses and see if I could heal them without their knowledge. And after like the 30th time of having success with that, I had to admit that I was having change. And that's the key to actually getting good at magic, is to do things that you can measure the change, the results of the rituals you're performing. Okay, so do a ritual for a specific purpose and then see if that happens. And when you get good at that, then you can start pioneering that field. That would be my advice, is for everybody to find their drug of choice. What does it for you? And take off with it.
So I will. I mean, yeah, I should close. So again with his name in Lzwvmmh, which, of course, according to whoever's intention is following along or witnessing or whatever. Yzot yamiga. Okay.
Well, thank you for having me, and have